Hello, everyone, and welcome to what I believe is hour 9, hour 8.
I think so.
I no longer know when we are, but I know where we are. We are currently at the CosmoQuest Hangout-a-Thon, where we are celebrating science. We're bringing on guests, we're playing games, and we are, well, building a future where all of us can work together to explore other worlds and learn new things. Joining me this hour is one of my colleagues in crime, Annie Wilson, and I'm going to let her introduce everyone on set. Annie, take it away.
Well, hi, I'm Annie. I did a lot of mapping Bennu, mostly against my will. I have strong feelings about Bennu, but I admit it is pretty cool. There are just so many rocks. Anyways, I am probably going to slaughter his name because I never took any Russo type languages. So joining me is one of the volunteers that the love. Did I get it close? That that
Uh,
please
eh,
save me.
uh, I have a couple of American friends who are always trying to pronounce my name properly, properly, and they always fail. So I'm going to try to say it in Bulgarian and okay, Svetoslav Alexandrov. So
Okay,
uh,
so,
we have
so I was
carved out.
close. I was just tripping up on myself.
But that's good that it was a huge effort. I think it was a huge international effort. We had people from not only from Bulgaria, but from Kosovo, Germany, Russia, and Brazil. Many countries participated in that citizen science project.
Yeah, so I'm always surprised at how international, Bennu mapping got. So how did you find out about Bennu mappers?
A couple of years ago, I was preparing to write something for my website because I'm the owner of the biggest website in Bulgaria dedicated to covering space news. The only one, I guess, nobody wants to do it because, well, few people read about space here. And I just saw that news on the NASA website that the agency is partnering with the CosmoQuest organization, and they're looking for people to map Bennu. And well, it was like, why not? I'll try it. And I have seen a lot of planetary surfaces before. I have downloaded most of the Mars rover images on my hard drive. I have seen all kind of images from starting from old cometary and asteroid missions like Giotto, like Stardust, later Deep Impact. And finally, we had that OSIRIS-REx mission, and I think that everybody got surprised because yes, it was the worst surface we have ever seen.
Was.
Yes,
Was.
it
It
was.
really was.
Yes, it was. Uh, mm, it was not a good way to land there, and the mission had to do it somehow. And apparently, time was running out, and they need some volunteers to map that surface. But I think that what I wanted to do is to feel like the teams during the Apollo missions, because okay, it was not during the Apollo missions, but a couple of years ago, 1966 maybe, if I recall correctly, it was the lunar orbiter mission. We because it was the mission that was required. So we had that lunar orbiter and the surveyor programs. The lunar orbiter had to map the moon, and the surveyors had to try to soft land on the moon. And of course, mapping with lunar orbiter was very important because they had to find a place to soft land the Apollo missions. And I'm not very familiar with how they did it, but I have heard that it involves some kind of huge projections on the wall or a screen or something like that, and they have to manually mark the craters so they can choose the safest place for these first Apollo missions. And this is something that I imagine that would be with the Bennu mapping, because yes, we are living in the new age, computer age, but yes. I think that it was manual labor. You just had to mark with your mouse big rocks, small rocks, and yes, I think that it took about half an hour to mark all rocks on a single.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, it did.
yeah. And then there was always the, do I mark this as a rock? It was like, is it smaller than the dot? If it's smaller than the dot, please don't mark it as a rock. And some people were able to actually see craters, like really big craters, because they had just gotten that good. But the craters were so big that you could only see a portion of it in the image. I wasn't looking for craters. I think I was just overwhelmed by all the boulders and rocks. And I think we kind of understood that it was just a gravel pile in space from the get-go.
But
And
we
we
weren't
understood,
expecting that.
right, like, and I remember talking to some scientists or not really talking to, one of the scientists at Planetary Science Institute at our summer retreat had some hands-on demos where they used chip cams. The really in the US they're Pringles, and I think they're kind of international, but they're real thin and real tall.
Mm-hmm.
And they were filled differently, and that kind of simulated the density of things. So like the density of the moon literally felt different to the density of the earth and the density of Bennu. And like we knew it was a gravel pile, but once it did the touch and go and punched instead of touched.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've heard that story that it was quite a surprising surface because, Sir Arthur Clarke had a novel about it was called The Fall of Moondust or something like that, and it was about spacecraft that sailed on the surface on the moon, and it suddenly sank. So I think that was really the first thing I have seen it happening, not in fiction but in real life, concerning a real mission that actually, yes, it sank right.
Yes.
Yes, in the test.
It didn't even sink. Like sinking implies gravity had something to do with it. The amount of force that my Cliff Bar is currently putting on my hand is significantly more than the force my feet would put on the surface of Bennu due to gravity. The thing was, the original plan was Bennu was firing its engines in order to fly toward Bennu so that it could touch the surface with its sample arm, fire its angry vacuum, slurp up a sample, and it was thought that basically it would touch, slurp, bounce away, and once it was a bit away from the surface, it would fire its retro rockets. And they were trying to fire it once it had bounced away a fair distance so that there was no chance of splashing back up at the spacecraft and damaging it. The thing that actually happened was Bennu touched the surface, went through the surface, kept going through the surface like a kid stepping into a ball pit. And it was when those retro rockets fired that it finally started to back away from the potentially spacecraft eating asteroid. And part of me really now wants to like take and see, can we fly through Bennu? Like, this is a question I now have. And I have yet to corner a scientist who had the free time to explore this and other silly questions about Bennu with me. True story.
Yes, that's really a great story. And just for the historical records, I think that it was the first American mission that actually had to land the first sample return since the end of the Apollo program, because the previous ones, Stardust, it's just flew by
Mm-hmm.
comet while two and collected grains with the aero. It didn't have to land, or the
Yeah.
Genesis that had to connect the
Well, and
or parcels. But yes, this was mm,
this was the
yes,
first robotic return for the United States. Back during the original exploration of the
yes,
moon in the 60s and 70s, the Soviet Union had sent a series of Luna missions that did sample returns by robotically grabbing rocks and then firing off the surface of the moon and bringing them back to our world. And the Americans were like, we're just going to send people. People go. People grab rocks. People bring the rocks back. We look at the rocks. And so in the years since the 1960s, and the Soviet Union kept doing this through the 70s, um, we've seen other nations do sample returns that didn't involve humans. JAXA was the first country to bring back a sample from an asteroid with Hayabusa 1. But the US, as you point out quite correctly, like, we'd collected samples from space by just like extending an arm and putting out aerogel and doing the what sticks to the aerogel. It's like putting out scotch tape and seeing what bugs get stuck in it. It's simple, it's easy.
And it's
But
effective.
it's effective. But Bennu was a technological leap forward with an asteroid that wanted to have absolutely nothing to do with us. One of the running jokes that I greatly enjoyed all of the comics about was Hayabusa 2, the JAXA mission, got to the slightly larger asteroid Ryugu before we got to Bennu with OSIRIS-REx. And the joke is that Bennu saw what Hayabusa 2 was doing at Ryugu, which included dropping an anti tank explosive on the surface to see what got blasted up. And Bennu responded by, when it saw a spacecraft approaching, it started throwing rocks, which actually happened. Do any of y'all know the science behind that? It was kind of cool.
It was cooking off, wasn't it? The surface was sort
Yeah.
of cooking off and spitting out rocks. And I
Really,
mean,
the heat was enough to just for rocks to just leave the
the
Yeah.
the volatiles
gravel pile.
were the volatiles were turning into little jets basically, and just sort of blipping them
Oh,
off the
okay.
surface. I mean, I think it was one of our community members was saying that the pressure or the gravity on Bennu is approximately equivalent to the pressure from the solar wind.
Yeah.
So, if you look at Bennu the wrong way, it's going to
Throw rocks.
throw rocks at you. And given that we punched it in the face, maybe who can blame it?
It
But I
it
mean,
knew what was coming.
It,
yeah,
it,
one
it,
of the
it deserved it.
I think one of the challenges for Bennu compared to, what the Russian Luna missions did is the time delay.
Yes.
So when you have something on the moon, you can control it effectively in just about real time. As real time as you're going to get for anything you've got that's
Yeah.
that's in orbit. Bennu was it 20 minutes? 20 light minutes. So it took 20 minutes for to be able to communicate with Bennu, and you don't know what you're watching on the screen as it's coming back has already happened.
And one of the things that we ran into, CosmoQuest was started our discussions to work with the OSIRIS-REx team at the University of Arizona back in, I wrote this down for this session, and I just have to pull up my notes because I don't trust my brain right now. So it was back in 2013. Hannah Thackeray, who some of you may know from the Eclipse trip that we did in 2017, she had become a grad student at the University of Arizona, and she was part of the OSIRIS-REx imaging team that was going to be doing site selection. And they realized they were going to have more images than they were going to be able to process, given the images were coming in right before finals and needed processed in that window where students are either gone for the summer or taking summer classes and are really too busy to focus on doing research for the most part. And so the original plan the mission had was, let's get all of the faculty's students and they'll just look at the images and it'll be fine. And it was not going to be fine. So starting in 2013, we worked on planning to get CosmoQuest involved. Mission launched in 2016. It was amazing. I'm here to tell you, one of the things they don't share about mission launches is the people watching the rocket go up who are part of the mission are having 4 different sets of emotions. There's the, oh my God, this is so awesome. I feel the sound from my spacecraft shaking my body. There's the, I can't believe I get to be part of a space mission. There's the, oh my God, why do I have to wait so long to get my data? And there's this voice in the back of your brain screaming, do not blow up. I lose my job if you blow up. Because it turns out you don't get your funding until your mission makes it to space healthy. So we did all of this planning, all of this work. The mission made it to space healthy, started its journey. And our job with CosmoQuest was going to be mapping the rocks, measuring the boulders, tracing the craters.
How many?
We thought
we don't talk about that.
So the thing was, we didn't have any close-up pictures of Bennu. All of the images we had of Bennu going into this, it was just a point of light moving across a field of stars. And so we assumed, and you all know what they say about people who assume, we assumed that Bennu would be similar to the asteroid Itokawa, which has a similar size. And Itokawa is basically a really cute little cashew in space. It has this nice curved, elongated structure. There are vast areas that are beautiful. Hello, folks in chat talking about hate mapping. There are these.
I appreciate all of the hate mappers. Yeah. I really do.
So there are these beautiful smooth areas on Itokawa. You pull up the typical image of Itokawa, and it might have 1 or 2 pristine, gorgeous textbook craters with sharp, well-defined edges. It might have a couple of boulders you can easily measure the length of. There might be a dozen rocks. And so we built all of our training software. We did all of our estimates of how long it was going to take to map using images from Itokawa. And Itokawa images took like 2 minutes each to go through and finish. And so we figured we'd be done with a few thousand volunteers in like 2 to 3 weeks. It was going to be easy. And when the mission started sending back the first high resolution images in December of 2018, all of us collectively went, oh, fuck. Yeah, that was the only word. I mean, some people used stronger language because there were no nice smooth areas. There were no pristine craters. Craters were simply areas where rocks had gotten smashed down a bit. It was terrifying. We had to redo everything. But we didn't redo the tutorial because we knew the second people saw these images, they were not going to be happy. And so we launched our Bennu Mappers website using the Itakawa images to train everyone. And then about half the people that finished the tutorial and looked at that first image of Bennu were like, no man, not doing that. And left. And left. And this is
so I made certificates for literally anyone who mapped more than one image of Bennu.
Yeah.
I regret this decision to this day because that's a lot of certificates because a lot of people mapped one image and we're just done.
Yeah.
Like thousands of people mapped one image and we're just, I'm done. I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah. Fully 50%.
Isn't that common for the citizen science project? Because I have, that Bennu mapping was my first citizen science project, but I think that it's common because there are some people who really join for about 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But then we have the super achievers.
Yes.
But of course, I know that I have mapped about 200, more than 200 images, which took me about 3 or 4 weeks to do that. For a couple of hours per day, but I know that there are other people who have mapped not hundreds but thousands. I have seen also some of their nicknames on other citizen science projects, and yes, I personally think that those of us like me, who I suspect I have never got to test myself, but but I presume that I have an what was it called, the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or something like that.
My friend, you are in good company.
Yeah, I think I have it because I'm jumping from one addiction to another, like from computer games to citizens. So I really found that Bennu mapping quite addictive.
It was kind of a game, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Once I started to do it, yes, I know many people would say it's boring. There are so many rocks, but I think that it's really very addictive to me because it's one image. I have mapped all of those rocks, and there's another image. Okay, there are some kind of images with just one huge boulders. These were my favorite.
Yes.
Yes,
I
think that I totally forgot about the presumed lack of creators because I think I marked very few of them. When you expect to see a creator, well, you expect to see a creator,
right?
Not just like a quarter of it or like even an eighth of it.
Well, and again, like when we were doing our moon mapping project,
it's a future Bennu mapper, I hope.
Hi, sweetheart.
I believe an animal I can't see just came on screen.
No, that was a baby.
Oh.
No, he's not a baby. He's 4 years old.
A small one. A small one.
A tiny human. How about that?
There we go.
So
the future generation that will step on the moon or Mars or an asteroid.
Yeah. Yeah, it was one of these things where we expected each image to take like at most 5 minutes, at most. And images were actually taking 30 minutes to 2 hours, depending on the person. And so instead of finishing in a couple of weeks, it took us 92 days. The mission team actually had decided we probably weren't going to be able to complete the project, and we're just in awe of what we were able to accomplish. And I think that really says a lot for what we did when the scientists are like, oh my God, this is terrible. And they're ready to give up. They didn't have a choice. They had to keep going, but they kind of expected us to give up. And we didn't. And Bennu was not what we expected in so many different ways. One of the big things was the mission was designed so that we were trying to find something the size of a whole group of parking spaces that was like nice, empty, no obstacles, so that the spacecraft could come down with its arm, but up from its arm, it still had its satellite wings, not satellite, solar panel wings, and you can't risk your solar panels. So we were trying to find a nice big spot, by which I mean I was watching other people try and find a nice big spot. I am so glad this was not my problem to solve. And when the mission was launched, OSIRIS-REx didn't have the ability to use computer vision to steer. It could only follow pre-ordered commands. And the expectation was, because of the landing ellipse, touching ellipse, we needed something that you could park like 9 Hummers there. 9 really big SUVs.
Like 9 really big Jeeps.
Yeah. And there wasn't anything that big and empty on the entire asteroid. What they were able to find was a series of places that were smashed down a bit, and it turns out they were craters. And the rocks were a bit smaller because they'd been smashed down a bit. And so this was as good as it got, and we had to significantly shrink the safety margin, and they reprogrammed an already launched spacecraft to be able to navigate on its own autonomously based on seeing features in the landscape, so that they could get a much smaller landing ellipse, touching ellipse, than what had originally been planned. And I'm just in absolute awe of what the engineers were able to accomplish. And yeah, that's it. I'm just in awe.
I mean, they ended up picking a crater that's 140 meters wide.
Yeah.
So that's what? Bennu was about half a kilometer, 500 meters. So it's like about 20% of the diameter of Bennu. Do you know where it is on this?
No, not a clue.
Oh, not a clue. So Bennu was basically covered in a whole bunch of these and other ugly things. And they picked one, and they went in and they tapped it. They were supposed to tap it very gently.
Yeah. Failed.
Just give it. Well,
It's supposed to be a love kiss.
It was supposed to be very gentle. It would come in, it would tap it, it would back off. Everyone would be fine. There wouldn't be any rocks thrown at the spacecraft. And I was looking at the video just before we went on air, and it was incredibly violent.
It really was.
You know, it went in and it just punched, and it went some significant
30
distance,
centimeters.
30 centimeters. So about that far into the surface of Bennu. And their goal was to bring back 60 grams, which is like 2 ounces for people who don't speak grams.
Yeah.
60 grams of asteroid material. They had capacity to bring back 2 kilograms, so 2,000 grams. And they've got somewhere between 150 and 350, depending on how you measure it. Do you include the stuff that's in the sample capsule properly only, or do you include all the stuff that was on the outside of...
so hard they accidentally scooped stuff up with the outside of the spacecraft?
Yeah, and it was a problem. It was a problem because I think at one point it was
lid.
jeopardizing. They were concerned about could they close the lid of the return capsule properly.
Yeah.
Did they? Am I misremembering, or did they do like a? They sort of spun the.
Yeah.
They spun the spacecraft to try and force some of the material away from the bits, and even then, when they were opening it, they had like 35 very fancy fasteners. 2 of them didn't want to open, and they only had approved tools. They're working in a box with gloves, and they only have approved tools to use in there, and none of their approved tools would open these last 2. I think they've solved that problem, but I mean, they had all this material outside the container, and it's like, well, we think this is fair chance this is Bennu. It could be Utah, but we think it's Bennu, and I think they've determined that it was Bennu.
Could be Utah.
It could be Utah.
That's
Well,
right, because it landed in Utah.
It landed in Utah, and it came hurtling in, and it punched Utah. It was. I'm not sure which was more violent. I'm thinking
So
Bennu would probably say it got the harder end of that deal.
Yes. So just to give you some basic stats, nearly 4,000 people spent 92 days going over images. We had all of the images looked at by multiple people. That way we could use statistics to figure out what was most likely real. Those nearly 4,000 people wrote 14 million lines to our database, marking the locations of rocks, the lengths of boulders, and tracing out craters. Our database was not expecting 14 million lines. Our database withstood 14 million lines. I am proud of us. We learned on December 12th, 2019, which was my birthday, that OSIRIS-REx would be going to Nightingale Crater. This was a feature that was mapped out by 64 of our humans. And quite honestly, Annie and I went to Disney World that day. We actually went to Disney World the day that we found out Bennu was going to Nightingale Crater. You want to tell that story, Annie?
All I remember is being bitter about rockets not launching and taking lots of video about things, asking if this is a rocket. I mean, there were other things about Disney, but
yeah.
I think I was more bitter about not seeing rocket launches. This is what happens when you plan a trip to see rocket launches
in August,
months in advance. Yes, you're like, oh, it's only like 4 months away. A lot changes in 4 months.
Yeah,
a lot changes in 4 months.
There were supposed to be 4 launches that week. There were 0 launches that week, and since we were there, we went to the Space and Rocket Center. We saw all the cool stuff. We rode the rides, got the sweatshirts, and then we were like, let's just go to Disney. And so we celebrated all we had accomplished in the most, you won the Super Bowl, now what are you going to do? Yeah, it was glorious. We have 7 more minutes left in this segment. I'm seeing lots of cool things coming up in the chat. People remembering all the different things that took part, bemoaning how many different images they did or didn't do. I'm kind of loving everyone who's like, I did 6.
That's fine. You did 6.
That was amazing.
That's 6 more than somebody else.
Yeah. And what's kind of awesome is just a couple of weeks ago, that sample came back to Earth, and Gordon's already hit on how difficult it was trying to liberate the sample, but we're already starting to get science.
We are. I mean, like, within the first few days, they started, once they got the outer container open and they found all this dust inside it, they said, well, we've got to do something with that. So they started going in with tweezers and things to very carefully extract everything. They've done analysis. They have found high carbon, evidence of high carbon content and water. That's like the building blocks of life on this rubble pile that's probably conveniently about the same age as the Earth, give or take 100 million years.
It's the Earth's leftovers.
Yeah.
It is.
Being a biologist, this is what I want to hear, just like that, because asteroids are really the key to understanding the solar system. And it's good that what we did was a couple of years ago, but we have that autumn, the asteroid autumn because of the Lucy mission, the first asteroid, the Psyche mission, and the discovery of new asteroids because are interesting activity. So yes, we're learning more and early part of the evolution about. I'm not talking dinosaurs or because it's hard to tell for about the time scale because people think about the hominids and dinosaurs, but these are that happened during past of tens to about hundreds million of years. We are talking about more distant year goes about 2 to 3 billions, and it's bio said sometimes it's a cryptozoic. Also, we have so fossil record. And yes, this asteroid those thin times that was understand early portion of the sun.
What I'm really loving is we're starting to realize that the stuff that's necessary to make life is just about everywhere and not as easily destroyed as we thought. There was a paper within the past 3 weeks that came out about Ceres, where when the Dawn mission was there a number of years ago, they measured complex organic molecules on the surface of Ceres. And the question was, how basically that sometimes that's as far as the question gets in science. And at NASA Ames, they have a vertical test range is what they call it. Essentially, they have a gun at the top of a tower, and they fire projectiles into a surface. And they created an artificial surface like Bennu's and attacked it with their own simulated micrometeors and less than micrometeors. And what they learned is these impacts have the ability to break apart organics, but they don't necessarily destroy all of them. And so, as we're looking at the oldest surfaces on Ceres and seeing these organic molecules and seeing the water that came up and is now ice from deeper within the asteroid, it is looking like within the geological constraints of an icy asteroid, complex organic molecules are capable of forming and moving through the world. And Bennu is not going to support life. It has had the bejesus knocked out of it by something. But other asteroids, quite potentially, are going to be places of life and also death. One of the reasons that we went to Bennu was to try and figure out how to handle something like Bennu being on a trajectory toward the planet Earth. And what we learned is every movie we've ever watched where they send the space shuttle out to somehow divert the asteroid, if your asteroid is the consistency of a ball pit, that just isn't gonna work. No. And so now we know we really do need to figure out how to use like gravity tractors and these other methods of moving asteroids that involve not touching them. Because if you try and touch them, your spacecraft will just go through them. This is what we've learned.
So, yeah, and like no one is going to touch the samples with their fingers.
Correct.
But
No.
There's about a team of a team. There's 200 scientists at about I think it's 60 organizations around the world,
Yeah.
and they're going to get samples.
Yeah.
They're going to get. And I was reading, for example, the University of British Columbia, UBC, is expecting to get milligrams of samples, so like a fraction of the total amount, and they're going to do all this science with it. But there's also, so like the major partners, which is like JAXA, so Japanese Space Agency, the Canadian Space Agency, and another one who I'm forgetting, they're getting larger samples. These are organizations that provided significant elements of the OSIRIS-REx
ESA
mission. Yeah, ESA. ESA is the other one, European Space Agency. But they're also going to be giving some samples to the Smithsonian and to the Space Center in Houston and to the University of Arizona that they're going to be able to put on public display. So you'll be able to go and look at Bennu with your own Mark 1 eyeball and say,
Oh,
well,
so I
I
can.
might have marked that. I might have mapped that.
You can walk up to it and curse at it directly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, that is one of my new
That's one
life
of your
goals, is
goals?
to curse at a piece. Yes, to curse at a piece of Bennu in person.
Well, then you just need to go to the Smithsonian or the University of Arizona.
And there's certain questions coming from this that really have me excited. We know our own world formed into what it is today with its moon when a Mars-sized object that we have retroactively named Theia smashed into the proto-Earth and caused a giant splash, and the materials from the splash coalesced over time into what we see as the moon. And so this starts to raise questions like, well, did some of the pieces just keep going and coalesce into something like Bennu? Are Ryugu, Bennu, and these other smashed to bits rubble piles the remnants of asteroids smashing into each other, of things smashing into Earth and Mars and sending things into space? We know that asteroids are the leftover building blocks of our solar system, but are they recycled from attempting to form planets? Or are they leftover bits like the flour that gets left on the counter and never made it into the bowl to make the pie? We don't know at what stage these asteroids got left over. And it's kind of amazing to think there's so many different options, but the more data we get, the more we're going to be able to figure out just what happened.
Yeah, it's the potential, and even the whole idea of Theia. I just read something that said there's some blobs inside the Earth that they've always wondered about. Now they've done, some researchers have done some modeling, and it, like, that could be leftover bits of Theia.
Yeah, it's cool. But that's a topic for a future Hangout-a-Thon. So we need to work on closing out this segment. We're going to be switching over to Veronica Cure in Minecraft, I believe. But I want to let our wonderful Bennu Mapper have the last word of this segment. What would you like to say to everyone?
Well, I feel privileged to be a small part of a real space mission. It was my first experience, and I really hope for more opportunities like that in the future, and for more citizen science projects from CosmoQuest. So thank you for inviting me, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you all so much, and we're going to round out this stream over on YouTube. We'll be starting at the top of the hour with the next segment, which is Diggy Diggy Hole, talking about how we explore space science in Minecraft. But for now, we're going to go over to Mars Base 2 and Veronica Cure. No, I'm being told no. We are going to send Gordon frantically running to his computer.
Alrighty.
I'm going to discuss fundraising while he gets that set. So let me know when we've switched over to the fundraising stream.